Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we are going to be checking out one of the games I gave Jim.
Yes, we are continuing our Christmas gifts to each other, as Brian let me take a look at the original Bioshock.
Far superior than anything Jim gave me.
Remains to be seen. Month is still young, Brian. Well, not really, but
It's almost Christmas,
just
Jim.
get into it.
That's what she said.
Originally released in 2007, this was developed by 2K Boston and was published by 2K Games. It was later ported to Windows, the 360, the PlayStation 3, Mac OS, the iOS, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. This is the first game in the surprisingly short-running Bioshock series. It's pretty much a revolutionary game for its time, but hopefully it isn't forgotten at this point. Let's just go in to see what made it so special.
The graphics. One very important caveat to mention when you're looking at the graphics right now is that when this game first came out, it was revolutionary. The city of Rapture was unlike anything we had seen at the time. A completely underwater world mixed in with this 50s, 60s style steampunk was something we just hadn't seen. And while it didn't go for a full realistic, that's kind of what helped it stay so relevant when you play it today. The splicers and some of the enemies you fight, the more human-looking enemies, I should say, they have a bit of a cartoony look, but they still look creepy as hell. Then you throw in the big daddies, and those things, whew, they hold up very well. The lighting is done in such a way that there's a lot of dark corners and just the right amount of light to make you really creeped out. The atmosphere is what really sells you on this game and the style. And when you mix in the little sisters going throughout, there's like a weird innocence mixed in with just such a horrific event that's happened in that city. It just leaves a memorable impression in your eyes. Too many games from this generation fall from trying to go too realistic, and this is not one of them. Jim and I, we absolutely love the aesthetic of the city, of the enemies, and even of the powers of how you use them, that all blend together very well. So, when it comes to scores, we both gave it 9s. Quite honestly, when it comes to beer, I'm not even going to add any. This game still looks great even today. The sound. Similar to the graphics, this went for a very 50s, 60s style sound, and you have a lot of jazz, swing, things that you would hear of the era, but they're done so well. And not to mention, the voice acting is really top-notch for a game of the time. Combine that with the roar of the big daddies and some of the more significant enemy sounds that you're going to hear throughout this game, and it's just very memorable. You're going through Rapture, and there is just a complete sense of isolation, and when you hear a little pin drop or echoes or enemies in the corner, it really reverberates in such a way that makes you think, holy shit, what is around the corner? Now, the music itself, while it is very interesting and compelling for that specific type of style, it's not memorable. So we couldn't give it all the points, but still, I gave it an 8 and Jim gave it a 7. I really love atmospheric sound because it almost seems to lend itself to a bit of a more horror vibe. But I can appreciate the fact that between the sound effects and the music, there's not a huge amount offered. So when it comes to beer, I'm going to add 1 because I wish they just had one really standout track that made me always come back and remember this game.
When it comes to control, it's actually surprisingly simple in this game. The right trigger button does your guns, the left trigger button does your Eve powers, the shoulder buttons are what you have to hold in to go to your circle wheels to switch between all of your powers and all of your weapons, and then the face buttons really just jump, activate thing, and use health pack or syringe. So for the most part, it's a pretty simple game that really works control-wise. My biggest issue with the control scheme would be things where, like, in the heat of battle, where I'd be switching back and forth between Eve powers and machine guns. I'd be on an Eve thing, thinking I would hit X to reload my gun, but instead I waste a syringe on myself trying to reload myself when I had basically full power. So those minor kind of annoyances aside, it's a pretty solid control scheme, and at the very least, they pause the game while you switch between everything, so you're not taking stupid cheap shots in between. For the most part, it's still, a little janky in the overall control scheme of it all, and the jumping was never the highlight of the game. It was a thing that was kind of there, but almost never necessary, but for the most part, it worked. Collision detection's pretty much fine, and there were a few times where trying to start to hack things, if you're not looking directly at it in the right situation, then you could say waste a health item or waste an Evo syringe, but it's a minor annoyance, but it's the thing that kept it from being perfect. So we both gave it 8s. And when it comes to beer, I'll give it 1 beer for accidentally wasting items in the heat of battle. The gameplay. So, at its core, this is a first-person shooter. You're going through levels, going through the different stages, killing enemies, finding exits, blah 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 blah. But it just becomes so much deeper than that. So first off, let's talk about all your different Eve powers. Because this isn't one of those games like, say, the Bethesda-era Fallouts in Skyrim, where you're either like a mage or you're a weapons-based guy. You really have to do a good balance between your powers and your weapons to make it through this game. It's so important to freeze an enemy, or zap an enemy in water, or set them on fire when they're near a gas thing, or use your gun to blow up, a concentrated oxygen container, or, switching between your different types of ammo, because every gun has 3 different types of ammo. Sometimes you'll have anti-personnel rounds, sometimes you'll have anti-armor rounds, besides your basic rounds, which are always cheaper. And then there's all the hacking mini-games, because you can hack health stations, you can hack turrets, you can hack armor things, you can hack the special creation things, you can hack basically everything that's in the game. And a good chunk of the game will be spent just hacking everything to make your life easier. Because say you're fighting a splicer, and they're near dead, and they start running away. Well, if they get to a health station, they'll be healthy again. But if you hack the health station, it'll let out a green mist. That'll kill them. Say you hack the security cameras. Well, instead of coming after you and sending drones your way, they send it to all the people around you, making your life easier. There's just so many different things here. Besides the fact that you can hack the big daddies, which can help you when you're going against normal guys, but if you're trying to harvest from the little sisters, it's not going to help you no matter what. And let's get to these little sisters. Because never...
Hey, Jim!
What, Brian?
Don't you think this would be a more appropriate song for every time you run into Little Sisters?
Wait, what song?
This one.
God damn it. Can I just go one video without some kind of 80s pop culture reference from you for some horror movie?
Lost Boys.
Yeah, I'm very aware. But you know what? Weirdly enough, with the Little Sisters, whenever you kill a Big Daddy, you have the choice to either harvest or rescue the Little Sisters. If you harvest them, you get more Adam, which goes towards more of your special powers and beefing them up immediately. Or, if you rescue them, you save them and you still get Adam, but not as much, but it leads to a better ending. Because there's really only 2 real endings in the game, and there's 2 different versions of the bad ending and 1 good ending. You get the good ending if you only harvest 1 or less Little Sisters, and you get the bad ending if you do more than 1. So basically you have to kill a little girl. And for parents of girls like Brian and I felt bad just going in and doing a quick save of harvesting a little sister, and then, going back to my game where I didn't harvest them at all. Because it's like, oh, you're pulling a slug out of a little girl's belly. Like, that's what it is. That's where the Adam comes from. So it's pretty messed up, and even more so than the Fallouts where you can kill an entire community of people in Megaton and not feel a thing and be like, oh, that was cool. You harvest a little sister and you're just like, I feel like an asshole. So with all that aside, here's where the big problem with this game comes from. The game overstayed its welcome. Because there's a ton of this game that just is fetch quests. Whether you're taking pictures of people that you kill for a certain guy, or you're going around collecting pieces of something for another thing. And honestly, the last third of the game is all fetch quests. Like, the big reveal of the game comes at like the 2/3 mark, probably around like the 10-hour mark, and you're like, oh man, I'm almost done now, and then it's like they just kind of keep throwing shit at you. Which is disappointing, because if it ended shortly after the big reveal, I would have just wanted nothing but more Rapture. But by the time I got done the game, I was kind of done with the world because it just overstayed its welcome just that much. But overall, it really is a fantastically fun time. It's great going around, searching through everything, doing all the hacking, doing all the searching, trying to get all the upgrades for your guns, trying to get all the upgrades for your skill trees. Holy shit, the skill trees. There's just so much here, so I think just because I was the one who played it more recently, I was a little bit more sick of all the fetch questing and filler at the end. And also, the last boss is pretty disappointing because you're so overpowered by the time you get to him that he's basically a joke. But Brian gave it a 9, I gave it an 8. It's still a fantastic use of your time. And when it comes to beer, I'll just give it 1 beer for making me choose to kill little girls.
The originality I'll keep fairly short. I may have given this game a little more points than it deserved, but because of the world itself, and one of the biggest driving components is that decision to kill or save the little sisters. I haven't felt that kind of feeling like Jim mentioned of like internal distress like I did in this game, and honestly I haven't felt it since then. So other than that, Jim mentioned it's a first person shooter. You find power-ups, and sure, there weren't a lot of shooters that had you get power-ups that were magical, but there was other games that were similar enough. So when it comes to scores, I gave it a 7, Jim gave it a 5. When it comes to beer, I'll add 1 because I may be using a bit of nostalgia, but still, this is one of those games that give you such a unique feel, and since I haven't felt it since then, I think it's well deserved.
The replayability. When it comes down to it, there's not really that many reasons to truly come back. There's 2 real endings. I mean, technically it's 3, but the 2 bad endings are just the inflection in the voice. And when it comes to multiplayer, there is none, but if you really enjoy the game and if you're a completionist, there's so much in here to discover. There's so much to find. And you know what? It's not the hardest game in the world to get all the trophy/achievement points for. So if you're one of those whores, 2 or 3 playthroughs, you'll probably get it. And each time you play, you can really change up the way that you do play thanks to that really extensive skill tree. So no 2 gameplay sessions really have to be the same if you don't want them to be. So technically, there's not a lot, but it really is what you make of it, so we gave it 6s. And when it comes to beer, we'll give it 2 beers for lack of multiplayer and 2 endings.
So overall, as you can tell, Jim and I, we really enjoy this game. It may not be perfect, but it offers so much that it's kind of a must-play of the past couple decades.
Yeah, it's really worth checking out just for the world it builds alone. Now, like we said, the biggest problem with this game is that it overstays its welcome. If this was like 10 hours long, it would be perfect. I would want nothing more than to delve back into the world of Rapture, but at this point, kind of good. Kind of good for a while.
Yeah, it has a lot of great ideas, and it was one of the better examples of mixing gunplay with RPG elements. And I just love that moral dilemma of trying to use the little sisters or save them. And the world itself is...
Brian was a good boy! I saved them all.
Thank you, Jim. But anyway, I also love the world itself. I think it's one of the more imaginative worlds. Usually you just have castles or whatever, and this underground Rapture, I don't know. I love the shit out of it. So when it comes to scores, Jim and I, we both gave it an 8. And when we combine them all together, it rounds out to an 8. It's definitely above average, and I think anything that would give this game above an 8, probably it was just you gave it at the time. Looking back,
I mean, it earned all the Game of the Year awards that it got, but looking back at it now, it's not completely perfect, but it's still a really good game that if you've never played it, at least play it once.
For sure. But with that being said, guys, thanks for checking us out, and cheers.
Cheers.
When it comes to beer pairing, I'm going to choose the Guinness Extra Stout. This is one of my favorite beers. It has a lot of character and is one of the more unique, drier stouts that you're going to try. For some reason, this beer just speaks to me just like Rapture does. I feel like the two complement each other, and I personally think if you grab yourself a six-pack, you're going to enjoy this very imaginative game. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.